Anthony, what's up?
Hey man, what's going on?
Nothing much. Just having a nice Friday evening slash Saturday morning for you live stream to
Uh-huh.
talk about all the things that we have been missing talking about lately. So, what comes to mind first?
Well, I mean, the reason we've missed things is because you've been on the conference circuit, right?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
live vicariously through you. Tell us a bit about the conferences you went to and like the fun things that happened.
Right. Okay. So it started off. The very start of this story begins 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, when Ahmad from Meta Factory telegrams me saying, "Hey, man, let's think of some questions to talk about on the panel that we're on." And I'm like, "Dude, like it's not for 24 hours. I haven't even left yet. I'm in San Diego." I realized, no, it's in like 20 minutes and it's in Denver and I'm still in San Diego. And I realized this like while I was in the middle of a live stream panel, doing the loop panel on Bankless. I immediately texted him. I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm still in San Diego. I have not left yet for Denver. And then I get a picture. He doesn't respond. And then I see a picture coming from somebody else. And it was Kevin Owaki being me. And I was like, oh, okay, he got it. Kevin, he's got it. He's got it. Nothing went wrong at all. But apparently that's what MCon was like. Apparently MCon was like this very bottom up conference where they just decided to rent out some places and somehow a schedule and agenda got thrown together, and everyone that went there and attended the actual conferences. Unfortunately, I came late, didn't get to see the first day, only got to see part of the second day. Didn't really get to see any of the talks actually, but they're all on YouTube, importantly. And everyone who attended MCon was like, dude, those are some of the coolest conversations that we've heard ever.
Mm,
And like
mm,
that was like in stark contrast to what was going on at Mainnet conference, where Mainnet is like the blockchain week, CoinDesk consensus, like you wear a suit and tie if you're a normie. And it's like one of those things where like, well, the content matter at Mainnet was a bunch of teams going up on stage and saying, all right, here's what we've done for the past year. Like if you haven't been paying attention, you can here's our year of progress in 20 minutes. Whereas Mainnet was like, whereas MCon was like, all right, DAO focused, here's about the future, here's how this works, here's why this is a thing. And Mainnet was like, everyone put on a suit and tie and we'll talk about what we've done for the last year. Yay. Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
So like very, very different cultures. And personally, I resonated with the Colorado MCon DAO culture more than I did with the New York suit and tie, like big mega conference culture. But they were each fun in their own rights. So I had a good time at
Mm,
each.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've only been to like the really core ETH culture conferences. I don't think
Mhm.
I've been to any of those ones like mainnet-esque kind of conferences. Even though I would have loved to have gone, because I've never been to New York, so I would have
Mhm.
loved to have gone to it. But maybe next year. But I think that the Denver ones, like even ETH Denver's like that, right? Where it's very bottoms up, very kind of like core ETH culture. Like
Mhm.
if you want to experience ETH culture to the max, you go to ETH Denver. It's so builder oriented as well. It was like what last time was like 3 levels of builders or something in in the building. Like it was just crazy, like hundreds of builders. So and that was funny because that was back in what Feb 2020.
February
So
2020.
almost
Yep. Mhm.
yeah. So coming up on 2 years back, and that was still the bear market back then, I guess. Like we had come out of 2019, like
No, we
really,
were
really
we
brutal.
were pumping for the first time and we hit $376. Ask me how I know.
Well, not in February, I don't
Yeah.
believe, back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. We hit
Are you
300
sure?
I'm pretty sure because we
Are
were
you sure?
yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, actually I'm pretty damn sure. And then like I was like, yes, it's finally happening. We're gonna hit 400. As soon as we hit 400, we're off to the fucking races. And
I don't think that was it, man. Though, like I
ETH
remember
ETH
the
Denver, it was February. It was really, really bullish at ETH Denver. And ETH Denver marked the top because what happened next was we went back down to $80.
Yeah, no, we sorry, it was 300. I don't remember us going over 300.
Oh, damn it. Did I just mix up 300 and 400? See,
No,
all
that's
right,
okay. No,
listeners, this is
because
why you don't second guess Anthony when it comes to things in Ethereum history. He
the
generally
reason
gets it
why
right.
the reason why I remember it is because I remember 300 being that like number that has PTSD for Ethereans,
Right.
because we sat at 300 for so long in 2017. It became
Yep.
like this massive kind of like meme
Wow,
thing,
you
and
are
then
right.
it
It was
became
275, not 375. Jesus. Huh.
yeah. So yeah, we kind of, but I think that the thing is though, it's funny because like, yes, we did like after the brutal 2019, we came into January really, really strong. Like looking at the kind of chart, January, we started like immediately pretty much like 1st of January, we just started mooning from like 126 to like,
it was a parabolic pump.
Yeah, it was. And within like a month and a half. And that was kind of like the relief pump. And everyone at ETH Denver was, I mean, we were cautiously optimistic. We were like, yeah, okay, is this it? And then March hit. And then we're like, what is going on? And then it actually took until July to get back to the price that we're in Feb after that. And then, of course, the rest is history. But I think, though, it was just funny because even though the price was going up, like, it was still I mean, the community was still very tight knit back then. It was like there was a lot of like everyone knew everyone. It was definitely not like a thing where you'd have tons and tons of new people coming in like we do today. So I don't know. Like, did you feel like the conferences? I don't know which ones you've been to, which are more kind of like ETH Denver ish. But do you feel like they were kind of like much different to what kind of like they were like 2 years ago? Like, is there just much more of a kind of like new faces?
MCon was even more distilled it was much smaller than ETH Denver.
Okay.
And the way that they like broadcasted MCon was not by like promoting it and selling tickets and selling sponsorships, but rather just word of mouth saying like, hey, we're going to do this thing. And like people just like, instead of like sponsoring, people just like bought stuff, right? So like the FIAT boys, like I think they bought out like a brewery for one of the 3 days or something. Like they did one of the things, right? And so many people just like bought space or time at these places, and it was all word of mouth, right? And so like if even ETH Denver is like kind of a big festival, right? Like it's like 6,000 people or something. MCon was, I think, 500-600 less than that, right? So very, 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 very like concentrated.
I'm curious to see what ETH Denver's like next year in Feb. I'm hoping I can go. That'd be awesome because it'd be funny. Like that's the last conference I went to before COVID. And then
you have to go.
Well, I'm going to try my hardest, that's for sure. But it's going to be interesting to see the difference and like see all the new faces and stuff that have like come into the ecosystem during the bull market during the last 2 years. I think it's definitely going to be a fun thing to see. But I mean,
because we haven't had an ETH Denver post bull market, right? Yeah.
No, we haven't. We haven't had one since Feb 2020. And same with like DevCon and things like that. DevCon's funny though because of the fact that it's in Colombia. Like I know a fair few people are just like, I don't know if I want to go to Colombia with like being a crypto person.
Yeah, so the EF seems just dead set on Colombia for some reason. I don't know why.
Apparently the venue is like really, really nice. That's why. Like apparently it's like because the main complaint of DevCon in Osaka was that the venue was kind of like shitty for a few different reasons. Like the elevators were like tiny, so you could only let up a few people at a time. And for some reason, they put the actual core Ethereum speakers and developers in like the side rooms.
Right. I remember that drama.
Like, yeah, there was a lot of drama, but that was still fun. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm still on the fence about if I'll go or not to Colombia. I mean, for a number of different reasons, not just the safety aspect of it. Maybe I'm not even allowed to back into the country if I go to Colombia. They might be like, when you went to a high risk country, you can't come back in. So who knows, man? Like these COVID restrictions are just like, they are what they are. But
you would have to pull a Mariano where you like just stay out for a really long time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think we promised people that we'd talk about like the compound stuff because me and you were having like a bit of a heated debate yesterday about this, and I was like, okay,
was it heated?
Let's pause.
Was it heated?
It wasn't.
I don't all of our debates are like heated.
Yeah, heated. But like, I mean, by heated, I mean like we were disagreeing with each other. We weren't like in alignment over it. Right. We kind of had our own opinions.
Right. Guys, we're no longer friends. It was because of Robert. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to kind of like give us the context so we can jump into it.
So Robert Leshner of Compound, and backing up even more, there was an exploit in Compound that happened as a result of a user submitted code that was accepted by the Compound protocol that unfortunately allowed people to claim comp tokens as a result of the liquidity mining or yield farming that Compound offers. Like if you supply or borrow from Compound, you get comp tokens as rewards for participating in Compound. There was a bug in this new code, in this new contract, that allowed people to claim comp tokens at the same emission schedule, but the emission schedule is sped up. right? There was like, I don't know the details on this. It was like 2 years of comp emissions collapsed into like a very short amount of time. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but some people claimed comp tokens and got extra on accident, but a lot of people figured this out and was able to exploit is the right word, the bug, the exploit the bug. Would you use that terminology?
I mean, yeah, like if you are doing it intentionally, then yes, you're exploiting a bug that you found in the system. But I think there were some cases where people did it accidentally.
Okay. So when we were arguing, I did not know that, and I thought it was exploit only.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on that. Like, I saw some people talking about it, but I don't know if it was ever confirmed. But I could see how that could happen, though. Like, if it affected the entire kind of like liquidity mining, I could see how that could happen. But yeah, I mean, I'd have to check up on that. But I think what we would kind of like.
Right. Okay. So that's the background. Can you do me a favor, and just share screen for Robert's tweet? Because this is what happens next. So Robert Leshner, CEO, founder of Compound. I'm pretty sure the biggest comp stakeholder ever, probably, most likely. At least like
I mean, yeah, you'd have to be the biggest stakeholder, yeah,
sure.
Or
okay,
one
so,
of.
So the Robert Leshner, founder of Compound, has all the stake of not all the stake is the single largest individual of stakeholder of Compound, right? So he has a lot to lose, right? He has a lot of personal reasons to maintain the value of comp, and also just like the nature of the protocol, right? He tweets this out, right? So there's all these people out there that got comp tokens more than they should have, more than they ought to, but ought is a funny weird word here. We're gonna have to parse that apart. And he tweets out this tweet that says, if you received a large incorrect amount of comp from the Compound protocol error, please return it to the Compound time lock. Posts the Ethereum address. He says, then keep 10% as a white hat. And then he finishes it with this sentence. It's the one that everyone gets like, in an uproar about. Otherwise, it'll be reported as income to the IRS, and most of you are doxxed. So what Robert is doing is saying like, hey, if you claim these comp tokens, we're going to make sure that you also pay income tax on or income tax or capital gains tax or whatever to the IRS, because if you claim comp, that's a taxable event. Therefore, you need to be reporting that to the IRS. And if you are doing that, that's fine. Great. But it's implying that like these people that are claiming this comp token are also not paying taxes, which generally is a good bet. I feel like if you are technically savvy enough to exploit bugs, you are also highly interested in not doxing those funds and are doing it in a private manner regardless. So like, again, good bet. But all of crypto Twitter turns into an uproar about like, hey, this is supposed to be DeFi, right? Like we're not supposed to use like regulators or agencies to impose what we want to have in our ledgers. And so that's kind of where the cards fell. Robert got a ton of flack for even mentioning doxing other people to the IRS, right? Because like kind of an aggressive stance, right? And like I said, like in theory, the people that have a lot to lose would also be the same people that would be interested in exploiting this bug, right? So everyone, all of crypto Twitter gives Robert a lot of flack. He follows that up like 10, 15 minutes later with a new tweet that says, I'm trying to do everything I can to help the community get some of its comp back. This was a boneheaded tweet / approach. That's on me. Luckily, the community is much bigger and smarter than just me. I appreciate your ridicule and support. So realizing that he sent a tweet that almost no one in crypto agreed with and walked it back without actually deleting the original tweet, which I think is honorable. But also it was like too late, right? Like got way too much attention too quickly.
Yeah, if he deleted it straight away, people would have had the screenshot anyway. So,
yeah.
But no, so I guess like two things on this before I guess we can dive into what we disagreed about. The first thing is that I think Robert put this out because he was stressed and under a lot of anxiety. I mean, Compound is his baby, right? Like this is his thing that it's a big part of his life's work. He still spends a lot of time working on it. Like even though Compound is quote unquote decentralized because they have the token and the governance process and all that sort of stuff. But He obviously put this out in a state of like, this is really sucks. Like, it's like $80 million or something worth of comp was claimed when it shouldn't have been. This is hurting comp holders and hurting the protocol's reputation. I'm going to put out this tweet. And he obviously didn't think it through and got a lot of flack, and then followed it up by saying, this is a stupid tweet, and he left it up, and I respect him for that. So I don't like people that kind of like threw the people who are throwing Leshner under the bus as well, because, you got to consider the context too. Leshner has been a champion of DeFi for, a very long time. He's one of the pioneers. He pioneered liquidity mining. Well, not pioneered it, but he popularized it with Compound. Synthetics, I would argue, pioneered it back in 2019. But he kickstarted DeFi Summer. He's the reason, or at least a big reason, why DeFi is where it is today on Ethereum and kind of like, in the broader ecosystem. So I think context matters here. This isn't just some kind of like random saying this. And I think that's like a double-edged sword, because it's Robert Leshner saying this and not some random. It means a lot more, and it's a lot heavier for people to see. But on the other hand, you got to consider the context. But on top of that, I wanted to just address what you said before. The funny thing is,
you can also stop sharing screen now. We can go back to just you and me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There we go.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that I actually think criminals are better off paying their taxes than not, because there's a lot of criminals who actually get caught out, not for the crime, but for not paying their taxes, because it's very easy to see if you're not paying your taxes, if you're splurging and buying all this fancy stuff and you aren't actually reporting the income to the IRS or something. Right. So I actually think it's good. It'd be good for criminals to do that if they want to stay under the radar. But So I think what we disagreed about was kind of like that last part of his tweet where he said kind of, we're going to dox you to the IRS or whatever if you don't return the funds. That does definitely go against the very spirit of not just DeFi, but crypto. Like, we're trying to build things that are disrupting both nation states and large financial institutions and institutions just generally. So saying something like that is what triggered everyone, of course. And for good reason. Like we like, my kind of whole argument around this is that if we're trying to disrupt something, we shouldn't be appealing to them for an authority or appealing to them to be kind of like our little lapdogs and be like, hey, we're trying to disrupt these institutions, but when we need them, we're going to go out, go to them and be like, hey, can you please help us? Like, something went wrong in our little playground, even though we were trying to disrupt you. It just doesn't work like that, right? It's a really bad, not only is it a bad look, but it's just like a really bad approach to it as well. And it sets a shitty culture. So that was kind of like my whole thing there. It wasn't really around like if people should return the funds or not. And there was like the whole code is law debate, we can probably get into. But your position was, I guess, like a little bit different here. So you can give your position.
Yeah. So I actually think this matters less about the nature of Compound, and I think what people are doing too much is that they are thinking that this is Compound, but in reality, this is just Robert, right? And so it's not there wasn't a exploit of compounding. Compound is saying, oh no, we need regulators to step in. This was a guy that has these resources available to him, which is like figuring out the identities of all these people, which is a publicly available service that you can pay for. There's not anything explicit to Compound or to Robert. And Robert's just saying, hey, like, do you want to be doxxed or do you want to return the funds? And like, anyone can do that. It has nothing to do with Compound. Anyone has these options available to them. The only difference is that Robert has the incentive. And so like, people are thinking that Robert is acting on behalf of Compound, but no, Robert's just acting on behalf of Robert. And this is the reason why I emphasize that Robert, he's the largest comp stakeholder that there is because like the role and responsibilities that nation states have is that when one individual feels wronged by another individual or another group of individuals, they can take that individual or group of individuals to court. Compound or Ethereum is not relevant to that conversation, right? These are just individuals who feel harmed and they think that they can make a case against other individuals, right? And so what Robert is saying is like, it's just, we have this like chess game of outcomes available to us, and Ethereum is the playing field, right? It's just a function of the fact that like, oh, the assets and valuable assets that we are talking about, they happen to be on Ethereum, but that's actually an irrelevant detail. These are just individuals talking to other individuals. And like, people, like, I think people are saying like, oh, Robert, this is against the ethos of DeFi. It's like, well, Ethereum isn't like, did you ever play tag when you were young? Did you ever like, and then you had like a safe zone where like is a rest zone? Like if you're on the bench, like you can't be touched. Like Ethereum's not just like this safe zone of away from courts. It's like, oh well, we would let you sue that person, but it happened on Ethereum, so we can't do anything. Like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah, yes and no though, because like what legal kind of claim does Robert have here? Robert didn't own that. That's a good question.
Comp. That's why this would be really interesting if it went to court.
But the thing is, the case would be thrown out because Robert doesn't own that comp. It didn't get stolen from him, right? Compound Protocol doesn't own it either, because if the Compound Protocol says we own this comp, well, that introduces a lot of legal kind of and kind of like tax ramifications to that as well, because the IRS would be like, well, if you own this, then why aren't you paying tax on it? Because the Compound Protocol doesn't pay tax to any nation state. It acts autonomously to pay out rewards to people who pay tax on their rewards, for example. Right?
I really want to tweet out, Jake Stravinsky, you just quit Compound. Come on and help us figure this out.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm obviously not an expert on the law or anything like that, but I don't think that he has a legal claim there. But the thing is that there are laws around hacking, right? And kind of like exploiting bugs and things like that. But they're all laws that were created for centralized information technology systems, not for decentralized ones. So I actually don't even know if that would hold up. It'd be like an interesting court case. Maybe this is going to have to be something that gets played out and there's case law that builds up around this. But essentially, like, I don't see what legal footing Robert could stand on, because he says like, oh, okay, well, the Compound Foundation, whatever he's part of, he's not like in control of the Compound Protocol. We're decentralized. But then if he claims, well, I was robbed, or like the project that I kind of like worked on that I founded was kind of like robbed. Right. I don't think that would hold up at all, because you can't have your cake and eat it too, right?
So one mistake I've done is like assuming that this is actually a court case, and when Robert says like, you guys are all doxxed and I'm going to report you to the IRS, that's actually not a court case. He's just like tattletaling on people, right? So there's an important nuance there. But also,
but it's also
go ahead.
It's also a bit of an empty threat though, because if these people pay their taxes anyway on it, like, you know what I mean? Like he's kind of assuming that they're not going to pay their taxes on this massive gain that they have. And I feel like that's a dumb thing to do, because like, why wouldn't you pay your taxes on? Or most of you are dogs because maybe
you're not paying your taxes on the rest of your crypto stuff.
Yeah, but the thing is, it depends on the size, right? I think a lot of people pay their taxes if they get to a certain size, because then it becomes very hard. Yep. Yeah, it becomes very hard for you to buy anything, because like if you start buying expensive things, or even buying anything, like even a house, if you want to buy like a house outright, or you want to kind of, I guess, like put a large amount of money towards a house, that immediately is going to get flagged if your income if your tax return doesn't match that amount of money that you've come into. So from that perspective, I think, I don't know, there's probably some dumb people out there, but I think most people are smart enough to realize that they need to pay the tax if they have a lot of money coming in. So I actually think that his threat was kind of like a bit of an empty one, in terms of like, people would see that and be like, well, what the hell, bro? I'm going to pay my taxes anyway. I don't care. Right. So then it comes back to, is what these people did illegal? They played by the rules of the system, right? I don't think code is actually law. I think like, you know, the law is law, and humans set the law and the social contract of these systems and everything. Like, for example, I mean, I gave this example on my refuel yesterday. Let's say 50% of all ETH on the Ethereum network was for some reason sent to the burn address, or like just burned, right? Like, and this ETH came from everywhere. It came from DeFi, came from staking, the staking contract, came from everything, and it hurt everyone. Do you think the Ethereum community would stand by and be like, oh, that's okay, code is law. That happened because of this bug. We know it's not going to happen again, so let's continue on. No, the Ethereum community would come together and be like, well, let's kind of fix this bug, change the state that this happened in, so that everyone gets their ETH back and everything goes back to normal. Right. Same with Bitcoin. Like, the Bitcoin say, oh, it's immutable. It's immutable until something really bad happens. Right. Then you're going to fix your shit.
It's immutable until you lose your Bitcoins.
yeah, exactly. So there's a certain threshold that needs to be met for like a quote unquote bailout to happen, or for the community to come together to fix something at the social layer, because the social layer is the last line of defense. So for people to say our code is law, like, it's not. Like, it's law to a certain extent, and then people were like, well, you know, this is bullshit. Like, we need to change this because it hurt too many people. So from that perspective, you know, I just don't buy into the kind of like code is law always sort of thing. Sometimes it is like, with this comp thing, it seems like it will be. There's nothing they can do to change this now, except appeal to people and be like, hey, can you please return the funds? Maybe not in the way Leshner did it, where he threatened kind of like IRS stuff, but more so in the way of, hey, like, return the funds, like, be a good Samaritan, be a good steward of the network. And I think that's what you argued as well. You were saying like the social layer matters, like being a good steward of the network, being a good person matters. But the thing is that it doesn't matter what your morals are and what your views are. Like people, they aren't forced to do it. And as far as I understand, there's no kind of like legal basis for them to do it either, unless you battle that in court and you basically had a judge side with you and said, well, okay, hacking and exploiting of decentralized systems is equivalent to doing it in centralized systems as well. It doesn't matter. It's still doing it. But then it's like the murky waters of like, okay, well, who did they harm? They harmed the compound protocol, but the compound protocol can't sue anyone. It can't take someone to court.
They harmed other comp holders. There was an $80 million dilution.
Yes, you would need the other comp holders to come together but it gets, I mean, as I said, not an expert on the law, but like it gets so murky, man. There's so many kind of like things and the implications of this case for decentralized systems would be vast, because there'd be case law built on this. And then it just strengthens over time too. Like case law, the more it's referenced, the stronger it gets. And you might end up in a really bad position where any kind of like a thing that kind of like favors one person over the other as part of a decentralized system, say MEV, gets classified as illegal, because if you do MEV, you're technically stealing value from people, right? Especially sandwich attacks.
Imagine trying to define MEV.
Yeah, so you get what I'm saying? Like you start doing that and say, okay, well, MEV is illegal because you're taking advantage of someone else. You're technically stealing their funds because of this, and this. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to see play out, but I really don't think we should be appealing to any kind of like nation state institution, at least not at this point in the game. Like maybe later on when there's a lot more people using this stuff, it's going to happen inevitably, but none of us should be calling for this. That's just kind of like my core belief.
Yeah, and what you just said right there at the end is exactly kind of like why I was like so surprised that so many people got really like just like passionate about this. Is like that you talked about like, is code law? No, but yes. And then also, but there are times where law actually impacts code, and so like we have code is law on the crypto side, code is code, and we have like law is law on like the nation side. But like there are some instances where the law can make people make transactions on Ethereum, right? Like the law will say like, okay, yes, you have to return that money. And like, sure, you can say it's on Ethereum, but like you can also go to jail, right? And but there's also times where it's going to be the inverse, right? Where like transactions happen on Ethereum, and then the court will be like, oh, well, because of what happened on Ethereum, that's what it is. That's the truth, right? And in that way, code is law, right? And so, but like, it's just going to be a case-by-case basis, right? Every single instance is, if it can be like, if the incentive is large enough to take that into nation-state law, then the court system will determine whether that Ethereum, where code is law, or whether law it will actually impact the code. Like they will determine that, and they will determine that by like, if you don't actually honor nation-state courts, then you're going to go to jail, which like, we're never going into a code-only world, because there will always be police. There will always be jails, right? So like these blockchain code is law phenomenon and these nation states law is law phenomenon are going to have to intermingle and intertwine with each other. And so like maybe it's not ideal that like Robert Leshner, the founder of like modern yield farming and compound, is the guy to like do this so early. But when societies and blockchains develop and like seam together, we're going to see more and more of this stuff where people are like saying like, hey, something happened on Ethereum that I didn't like, and there are these individuals that I can take to court. And that is just a nation state phenomenon, and that is going to happen. And so we're going to see this more and more and more. Hopefully it like to your point, it happens in places that are outside of the social layer that actually defines the ethos of DeFi. Maybe that's the big mistake that Robert made, is that he is a guy that is about this life and then stepped out of that life to do this thing. But like other people are going to come into Ethereum and like crypto at large, and they're going to be like, they're going to have some incident that's going to take somebody else to court. And then the court system will determine the state of Ethereum based on the realities of those two or groups of individuals. And we need to come to terms with that. And it was just like there was that article about how I think Chainalysis had like spun up some like snooping site on, it spun up a Bitcoin wallet explorer. And then it would like trace your IP address and track it with your Bitcoin wallet. And then it would assume that those things are connected, and then it would use that information to narc on you. Like, this is the realities of a public, open, auditable ledger. Society gets to use that public, open, auditable ledger and take that data to court. Like that's what's going to happen a very frequent amount of times, right? And so we just going to have to come to terms with that.
It's going to vary though, like between nation states. This is the thing, and because Ethereum doesn't have a nation state home, like what, you know, it's just kind of like thinking through the implications of this. Like, what laws does Ethereum follow? Well, Ethereum follows its own laws. It's set in like, I know code is not always law, but like while in the normal case, Ethereum code is law, because like the law that everyone's following on Ethereum and everyone's playing by, all the rules that we're playing by on Ethereum is set by the code. Now, of course, the code can be changed, and it, as I gave the extreme example before, it would be changed. I mean, it's already been changed before with the DAO. That was an extreme example, and that, you know, community came together and changed it back then.
And importantly, no one took anyone else to court.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you basically had like the court of like public opinion within Ethereum, the court of the Ethereum community, kind of like handling it. And the community was much smaller back then. Doing it today would be a mess. It would be very, very, there would probably be some kind of like court cases that spun up about this from some people, ambulance chasers as they called, like trying to sue someone. But I don't know who you'd sue, because I mean, Ethereum is actually truly decentralized. Like you can't go after the Ethereum Foundation or anything like that. It just, you could try, but I don't think you'd succeed. But you know, in saying that, it's just kind of like different nation states are going to have their own different approach to this. A lot of them are going to be very far behind. And, you know, what happens if you exploit something from a nation state that doesn't have any kind of case law around this or anything? Like, can someone sue you for that? Like, do you get extradited because you did this? Like to you know, have your kind of like case held in the US, for example. So it's definitely, I think, a murky area. And if the thing is that, and then it brings in a lot of other implications of, okay, well, you know, the protocol is decentralized, but like these humans are kind of like suing each other over something, or like trying to get their funds back. But the protocol did what it was programmed to do. This was an exploit that happened. So like, can that person be forced to return the funds? Or is it just kind of like, well, you're out of luck because this property never belonged to you in the first place? You know, in the comp case, it's like, that comp belonged to other people, sure, like over the period of time, but it didn't belong to people in that moment. Like it was an IOU, and it was only an IOU if you had liquidity mined with Compound. Like, there's no guarantee that you would have been able to claim those rewards in the future, because maybe you took your liquidity out of Compound. So it's like, okay, well, you stole from the Compound protocol, technically, like stole, quote unquote. It's like, okay, well, the Compound protocol isn't a person; it's like an autonomous machine. Like, you know,
does it have intentions?
Yeah, exactly. So. And then you fall back on, well, okay, what it just gets really murky. It's like, how do we solve this? So I'm sure we're going to see it play out in the courts. But I think, I mean, I think what our disagreement was like just generally about was the fact that, yes, I mean, I agree with you. The humans are kind of like at the you know, the layer zero of this. Like it's the ultimate layer. But sometimes code is actually law, where people don't have to be a good human. They can be a shitty human and not return the funds and exploit things, and nothing will come of it. They won't get in trouble for it. They'll pay their taxes on it, right? Like, and it'll be all well and dandy. But I mean, I think the ethos of DeFi is you shouldn't go and to regulators, to nation states, to big institutions, central institutions, and be like, hey, save us. But the ethos of Ethereum and crypto generally should also be that, hey, if you take advantage of something, it's a really shitty thing to do. So you should return, you know, some or all of the funds just to be a good person. I mean, that's like kind of like a moral debate. It's not a legal debate. And we've seen this play out before where people have returned funds, like Alchemix, 55% of the ETH that was exploited got returned, which is a pretty good outcome. But you can't rely on altruism and people being like, you know, good citizens,
it's
good
about
moral
what's enforceable.
people. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why we have courts and laws and everything, is because most people.
Well, it's also why we have code and smart contracts. Those are also enforcement mechanisms, right?
Exactly.
So like having this desire of like, oh, you know, you shouldn't have gotten that comp. Like, it's not scalable. Like, there's a reason why we have the phenomenon of whole smart contracts is like, well, it's enforceable and it's scalable. Like, it's saying like, oh, the ethos is that we do good things. Like, sure, you.
Yeah, these protocols are designed with the worst case kind of like person in mind. Like, what if the 100% evil person wanted to attack this network? We have to design for that. And that's what Ethereum is designed for. And we've seen, like, if there's an exploit in Ethereum, in the Ethereum core protocol, it will get exploited. Like, if there's a bug, it will get exploited. We saw this happen with the Geth bug a few weeks ago. this is an extremely adversarial environment. People will do things for different reasons. Some people will do it because they just want to have fun, want to watch the world burn. Some people will do it because they want to profit from it. Some people are just like downright evil and want to inflict pain on others and things like that. So you can't rely on the goodness of people to kind of like do these sorts of things. And that's why we have the courts and legal system. But in a decentralized world where none of this kind of stuff has been fought in the courts before, and we don't have any kind of precedent here of what happens legally, you have to just rely on the code. You have to basically code up your contracts so they're resilient, so that they don't have exploits in them. You have to be really careful about what you do. And when you do suffer an exploit, you have to just accept the fact that it happened. You can ask for the funds back. I have nothing against asking for the funds back, but don't use the kind of like threat of legal force of like the IRS, especially to kind of enforce that and to try and like scare people into it. Like I'm all for people being like, hey, you know, hacker, like, or exploiter, you know, return the funds, please. But other than that, there's not much you can do. Like, you know, even if you know who the person is, you could try taking them to court, but maybe that's what needs to happen for people to kind of like settle on this thing. Well, the courts aren't going to help us, so let's build better code. But generally, we should just be building better systems and code anyway. There shouldn't be any kind of like lapses there. Everyone should be building a system that considers the worst case scenario.
I do think that is the ultimate point, is that like, well, if we built good code, we wouldn't have to have this conversation. So like that is like the final like lesson that we should all learn. But I do think the step that comes right before that is like, when we do take this to court, like the judge has two options, right? It looks at the intent of the compound protocol and it sees that like, well, the protocol is a protocol. It has no intent. So whatever basically the judge says, well, code is law. There aren't any intents baked into this thing. There's just code. And so I'm going to have to take the state that comes out of it as truth. And therefore, sorry, Robert, you get nothing. Or the judge takes the case of like all of the intent of all of these compound governors and like subjectively interprets what their intent was, and to see that their intent was violated. Like that is there. Maybe there does come a day where a court case is of that nature. Is like, well, do they interpret the intent, or do they interpret the complete absence of all intent ever? And if there is a court case that happens like that, literally all of crypto will be watching that. Like, it's like, is code law? Is code law, or are humans law? Like, what's it going to be? What's it going to be?
The funny thing is that you mentioned the compound governors, and they were the ones who voted to make this change and to put in this in this bunk code. So like, could they be held legally responsible for this? We don't know, right? Like, could you argue in court and say, well, these people are the actual stewards of the network. These entities are the stewards of the network. They should have checked this. They're responsible for what happens on the protocol, what changes happen. Therefore, we can bring a case against these people. And if that happened, what you're going to have is you're going to have lots of people not wanting to get involved with decentralized governance at all. There's going to be no one using their tokens for governance because there's the threat of legal action, or you're just going to have like anonymous people doing it. It gets very kind of like murky. Then we haven't seen this play out in the courts yet, from my understanding. So when it does, we're going to see if the governors like and the delegates, like people that are actually have tokens delegated to them and putting the changes into the network. Are they responsible for whatever happens on the network? If they are, well, yeah, that gets it gets very shitty for DeFi, I think.
Right. Yeah. As we we're a little bit beyond halfway. Everyone, thank you for tuning in to this semi-regular Friday weekly live stream. Here's Anthony's daily Gwei YouTube channel. I just posted that into chat, where Anthony talks about stuff like this 5 days a week, and then has his weekend-ish data pump videos as well. So overall, producing a ton of content. So if you want more Ethereum things, you can go and give him a follow in the link I just put into the chat there. Anthony, I think this conversation wraps up with this part of the conversation. Damn, I had this in my head right beforehand. Is like my learning lesson is that it's not that like over the very long time, code will ultimately supersede nation states, but for the shorter time frames of like 1 year to a few decades, like people are going to learn that these things engage with the other things, right? Nation states engage with blockchains, blockchains engage with nation states. They're going to weave themselves together, and we are all going to have to like traverse that chasm, because it's a frontier and no one knows, right? And so like that, this is my like learning lesson, is that like this is going to be a subject matter that we revisit very, very frequently.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it's like to be on the frontier. You have to deal with all these sorts of things, all the unknowns. Like you have no idea what's going to happen. And yeah, I think we'll eventually see these play out in an actual high-profile kind of court case, and we'll see, I guess, what happens from there. It might be a good result, it might be a shit result. But as I said, like there's different nation states, so it doesn't matter what happens in the US. Yeah, the US is one nation state. There are plenty of other ones, and ones that aren't allies with the US either. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to see play out, I think.
While I was taking whatever stance that I was taking with regards to this whole debate, I was like, wait a second, am I Vlad? Is this what Vlad says?
Yeah. I mean, he's got a lot of interesting ideas around governance. I remember listening to a podcast with him and Gavin Wood a long time ago. Like this would have been 2017 or 2018 or something, where they were talking about governance. And man, you can talk about governance forever because it's so subjective. Like it's just extremely subjective, and it's just highly dependent on the individual's view of things. And I mean, that's exactly why we have courts and court systems to battle these things out, because the law is never black or white. Like it is always gray. And you know, even if you say, okay, well, this person murdered this person, well, you have to consider all the context around it. Is it actually murder?
Was it intent? What was the intent?
Exactly. And you have to prove it. To prove murder, you have to prove intent to kill, or otherwise it's manslaughter or some other kind of like definition there. But and it's the same thing with a lot of other things. You have to prove intent a lot of the time to get like a strong guilty verdict. So yeah, governance is a rabbit hole that you can get lost in for a long time.
Right. And this is why the conversation on blockchains is always so interesting, right? Because like if you want to understand them, you basically have to go back to like recorded history, right? It's like you have to learn about like all the ways that because it's layer 0 all the way down, and the culture of humans goes back to like as far as culture can go, right? That's why blockchains are so cool. They reference everything.
Some people like to sweep this under the rug and say, oh, the blockchains are autonomous and whatever. I was like, no, they're not. Who do you think's running the chains? Like, it's not an AI, it's humans. Maybe in the future when an AI is running it. They
come from like Mars or something. They came from us.
Exactly. So it's definitely, I think, important to be reminded about that constantly, is that like humans are the ones running this. Humans are the ones building everything on it. Humans are the ones interacting with it the most. I mean, there are bots, but those bots are also programmed by humans. It's not like we have AIs that are fully artificial intelligent. Like they create themselves, they replicate themselves. Maybe we will in the future. But yeah, it's all humans right now. So that's something people forget, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no one really wants to like think of that stuff as like the dirty laundry of humanity. Is like, oh yeah, governance is this thing that we've literally never been able to get right, because as soon as we get it right, other people have problems with it.
There's no, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. There's no right or wrong, because you have different morals, you have different subjective opinions on things. Like, that's exactly, again, why we have like the court system, is because I mean, and then it's funny because like different nations have different laws based on different kind of like reasoning. Then you have like different religions have different kind of like morals and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, and it's funny because like there are certain places in the world where yes, they believe murder is wrong, but only against certain people. If you murder other people, then it's fine. And this, you know, that's the thing. And you know what's funny? The thing is that like this was even prevalent in places like the United States with, you know, the slavery era, like where you treated slaves as property and they weren't actually humans, so you could kill them and it'd be fine, right? So like just thinking from that perspective, that's why everything's so subjective and everything. And like what your morals or what your view on something should be is not the same as someone else's view, necessarily. So, and I think that's going to be the same thing with blockchains. Like not everyone believes, some people truly believe that code is law. Whatever was programmed into a contract, if it got exploited, well, bad luck. That was part of the code. Other people believe, well, that's a shitty way to look at it. Like these things are still run by humans. It's still social kind of like contracts here. You should be able to kind of fall back on that. So just depends who you talk to, I think.
100%. And that's why we say it's always people all the way down. And even the Bitcoiners who are like, no, it's math. To bring back what you said earlier, it's like, well, what happens when like 70% of them lose all their Bitcoins to the same bug? 75? 80%? Like, what's it going to take, Bitcoiners? Like 99%, and all of yours, you're like, well, I guess I just lost my Bitcoins. Like, no, at some point in time, like the Bitcoiners are going to be like, we're hard forking Bitcoin because I want my Bitcoins back. Like it'll happen to them too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's a low chance, obviously, but the thing is that, as I said, these systems need to be built with the worst case scenario in mind. And the worst case scenario is a major bug that affects most of the network. And what's your recovery mode from that? Well, it's the social layer. So if your recovery mode is the social layer, then you can't claim that it's Cody's law and that the whole thing's autonomous.
Right. And you also have better been doing a damn good job, like building that social layer too. Like I think
yeah, exactly.
one of the biggest mistakes that Bitcoiners will have faced in the future is that they optimize for shattering their social layer. They have a great social layer regardless, but it's one that is specifically optimized to not coordinate, right? It's just like, oh, Bitcoiners, yay. Whereas Ethereans are being like, hey guys, like we need to figure out what the fuck we care about because like we have to hard fork in 6 months.
Exactly. So, and you know, that issue may kind of like get more and more prevalent for them as we go through the years where their security budget comes down. That's something that we've spoken about before, and a lot of people have spoken about, where the Bitcoin block subsidy gets halved every 4 years, which means security budget goes down, and if the fees don't match kind of like the subsidy, then the network becomes insecure. You know, maybe they have to kind of like fork to a proof of stake, which, you know, thinking about that today just like is hilarious because I can't imagine any
Not
of the Bitcoin
single Bitcoiner,
like,
right? If you say it, you're not a Bitcoiner.
Exactly. If you even entertain the idea, you're not a Bitcoiner. And especially the more hardcore ones. And then, you know, removing the cap, that is even worse than suggesting proof of stake, like adding inflation to Bitcoin.
I'm in that camp, actually. I'm in the camp that if you change Bitcoin's 21 million hard cap, it's no longer Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is 21 million hard cap or die.
That's the thing. But you know, okay, let me push back on that for a little bit because I've heard this before. I actually think that Bitcoin is whatever the majority wants Bitcoin to be. So if the majority wants Bitcoin not to have a 21 million cap anymore, then it's not, you know, that then Bitcoin is the inflation coin now. So it doesn't matter that right now people think that Bitcoin is 21 million. It could be different in the future.
I'll walk back my statement, and I'll say that there are many things that make Bitcoin Bitcoin, and the 21 million hard cap is the thing that will go last. As in, like they will fork to proof of stake before they give up the 21 million hard cap.
Yes. But the funny thing is that proof of stake works best when it has perpetual inflation coupled with a fee. But like, you know, that's kind of like the Trojan horse getting proof of stake
like,
in.
It only works when you also have a smart contract layer, right?
Yeah,
so the fee burn, the smart contract layer, and proof of stake, those things have insane symbiosis with each other. And like Bitcoiners just discount all of that, and they say really intensive security cost budget. Also, no security budget.
Yeah. You know, the funny you said like symbiosis there. I mean, I wrote a piece about 1559 a while ago, like over a year ago in the Daily Gwei, where it was one of my first pieces where I said, where it's titled Creating a Symbiotic Relationship, which was basically that, like, because Ethereum has an expressive base layer, because it generates so much fee revenue, and because we can harness that fee revenue and put and burn it, and because we're going to go to proof of stake with a perpetual issuance, we can, I mean, Justin Drake obviously has talked a lot about this on Bankless, but we can secure the network while also ensuring that we capture the value as well. We don't pay too much for security. So Bitcoin can't do that. Like, unless it adds smart contracts, I mean, it won't. I think the thing that Bitcoin might do in the future, maybe, is add a way to verify ZK Starks and Snarks, because then they could do layer 2, then they could do roll-ups. But I even think that would get pushback from people being like, well, that's a huge change.
Ethereum already owned it.
I mean,
like, that's what the Ethereum people are doing. That we can't do it.
Yeah. But also, like, it's a big change for Bitcoin, like relative to their other changes that they've put in. And maybe they'll say, oh, it's a soft fork. God, I hate that terminology. A soft fork is a hard fork in, you know, maybe not on a technical level, but like in spirit, it's a hard fork, man. It's coercive. It forces people to upgrade. So it's just, I mean,
soft forks don't force you to upgrade. That's their one thing.
No. But see, this is the confusion. Soft forks, on the technical level, they don't force you to upgrade. On the social level, they do, because it's basically saying, if you want the benefits of this new cool thing we introduced to Bitcoin, then you have to basically upgrade.
Okay, well, the difference is that, like, if you are a Bitcoin OG with 1 million Bitcoins and you've been running the same node that you've been running since 2009, you still have your Bitcoins and you didn't upgrade.
Yes, but I don't think you can actually run clients from that early on. I think the earliest clients you can run are like 2012 or 2013.
The point still stands.
Yeah, yes, yeah, but the thing, yes, and it depends what other soft forks they do in the future and what they introduce. But the reason why, I mean, Vitalik has argued this as well, where he says that, I think it was Vitalik, where he says that soft forks are more coercive than hard forks because soft forks like a subtle force change where it's like they're promising you that, oh, well, you can still use the old network if you want to, but if everyone kind of like adopts this new thing, like if everyone adopted SegWit, well, then your old transactions, from my understanding, like your old one would be second-class citizens to the SegWit transactions, and you'd be better off just upgrading, which means you're kind of like forced to upgrade anyway to enjoy the benefits.
Right. It's more insipidous.
Yeah. So and I think that like they use that terminology because they really don't want to go back on that kind of like, oh, we don't do hard fork sort of thing. But I don't know, man. It's just it's always been bizarre to me. It's like, as you said, their social layer is, I wouldn't call it a broken social layer. I would call it, like, as you said, they optimized for something completely different where it actually can't handle this sort of stuff.
So there's a YouTube comment from Virat. Sorry, Virat, but like I wholeheartedly disagree. I'm going to read this out loud. We need a justice system for crypto integrated directly into the blockchain.
That's on-chain governance, right? That's what something like Polkadot is trying to do, I believe.
Yeah, I guess that's, I guess it just boils down to on-chain governance.
Like, yeah, to an extent, because you can have different forms of on-chain governance. I mean, I disagree with that as well. You start introducing subjectivity into the base layer, like extreme subjectivity. I know that there are, like with Ethereum, we have this kind of like culture of hard forking regularly to introduce upgrades, and those upgrades are subjective. But if you have like a court system, like, I mean, how does that even work? Like, does that mean that anyone can?
Who are the arbiters?
Yeah. And the thing is, though, Ethereum does have a court system, like not a subjective one, a technical one, where you, like, for example, with layer twos, with kind of like optimistic rollups, you can submit fraud proofs to prove fraud. Like, but that's on a technical level. That's like a kind of process that optimistic rollups go through over a period of 7 days.
But then it goes back to like, well, was it even legitimate in the first place, regardless of the math, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So that's the thing. It's just funny when you think about that. But like, I think Ethereum already implicitly has like a court system. The court is the code. The code dictates what the rules of the system are. And if you want to challenge that in a court, so to speak, if you want to challenge the rules of the system, well, you just look at the code and you can say, okay, well, the code ran exactly as it was programmed to, and you go to Ethereum as your source of truth, because Ethereum will tell you what the state was. But that only works if the judge
that you're talking to agrees with that is the actual rule of law.
The judge is Ethereum, though, right? Ethereum is saying
in the Ethereum world, but not the greater world.
No, not the subjective.
Okay,
like I'm
just
talking about
Ethereum,
like
then yes.
Yes, in the Ethereum protocol context itself, Ethereum itself is the final arbiter of everything that happens on the network, because you can see the state at any given time. The state at this block was this. Now the state is this. This is what changed. And this is the Ethereum network telling me that this is the source of truth, because the Ethereum network is run by thousands of nodes around the world. They have the miners and stakers with proof of stake, and you have people come into consensus on things.
Your peers, if you will.
Exactly. The nodes are the peers that come to consensus on something, and then Ethereum is the ultimate kind of like the Ethereum block, or the Ethereum state is the judge of everything. But I guess what they were talking about was like a subjective system where you could basically have like a council of people who come together and say, okay, well, we can change
the math was wrong, guys. Math was wrong. We're doing something else.
But the thing is, to an extent, we have that as the final layer zero defense against something catastrophic happening on the network, but it's not an everyday thing. And I think that's the way to play it. You can't have it for everything. You have to have it for like the existential threats only.
So Virat, to answer your question, I think we agree that we do need a justice system. What Anthony and I are saying is that justice system is called humanity, and we don't want it directly integrated into the blockchain. We want it so far separated that if we have to actually invoke humanity to make state updates to a blockchain that don't actually align with the math, then we will do that when the time comes. But we also don't want to formalize that, because we want that to be difficult.
And I mean, as I mentioned before, it's called an irregular state change, where it was exactly what happened with the DAO, where the chain wasn't rolled back for the DAO. What ended up happening was that they went in, they in the code, they have like a blacklist of all the addresses that were used to drain funds out of the DAO. And they basically say, take this and put it into this contract. And then everyone who had ETH in there can claim their ETH back and everything. And then everyone who disagreed with that change went to Ethereum Classic. And then really at the end of the day, humans decided what the winning chain was. Like humans were like, okay, well, Ethereum is the winning chain. Ethereum Classic is not the winning chain. Even though Ethereum Classic is technically the quote unquote original chain and Ethereum is the fork, it doesn't matter because Ethereum is the canonical Ethereum chain, the Ethereum we all know and love today.
I think it's so awesome that Ethereum is actually a fork.
Yeah,
it's a secondary chain.
yeah. Technically Bitcoin's a fork too, because early on in its life, they had that inflation bug, right? Right. They had to fix that. So, and I think that's fine. I think as we've been saying, the social layer ultimately decides what is Ethereum, what is Bitcoin, what is X and X chain. But if you have a weak social layer, it's very easy for a small group of people to kind of like dictate what the chain is. And that's what we mean by centralized chains, where people can't run nodes and there's not a great culture of kind of like social contracts and layer zero culture. And that's why a lot of us kind of like reject a lot of these other chains that spin themselves up, especially the ones that require like beefy hardware to run. Because if users can't run their own full nodes, if users can't verify things for themselves, then there's never going to be a culture that forms around that. Right. The culture that forms will be one that is kind of like implicitly relying on these kind of like handful of people to steward the network. And those handful of people can do whatever they want. Right. And the users won't even know if that happened. Like, who's to say that one of these networks that has like a very centralized validator set doesn't kind of like come together and be like, hey, let's print ourselves extra kind of like X and X tokens. Who's going to notice that? Like if there's no one running nodes, they could just do a stealth inflation, or they could do something else. They could censor users. Like there's all this sort of stuff that goes on. And I think if you have a weak social layer, you can't recover from that. It becomes like very, very, if not hard, if not impossible to kind of like recover from that.
Yeah, I think you and I will just be like harping on the importance of the social layer like forever. And not that many people, I think, are going to get it. And I think like crypto will still like unfold the way that you and I like hope and desire it will. But not necessarily because like you and I actually just were harping on the importance of the social layer for like years and years and years. I just think like to some degree, like I am bearish on any protocol that has never made it through a bear market, right? Like if you never got tried as a protocol at the social layer, then are you really a protocol? And Bitcoiners have gotten tried multiple times. Ethereum has had its very big trial of like potentially losing everything with absolutely zero funding throughout 2018, 2019, and early 2020. But like name one other protocol that has gone through trials, right? If these are social systems all the way down, then like culture is formed in bear markets, right? Like value and vision and commitment is formed in bear markets. And when any other like blockchain that is only formulated in bull markets only comes alive and like that does swimmingly in bull markets, like great, it's easy to do well in bull markets. Like let me see you go through a bear first.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing, because like if you want to be a bit I guess like, what's the word I'm looking for? A bit realistic here for a second, but also it's kind of like shitty to think about sometimes. The reason why most people are here is because they want to make money, and that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't form a culture or a strong layer zero just with people who are around because they want to make money. And that's to your point of, in a bear market, most, if not all of those people are gone, and you have the core believers left, and they set the culture, they set the layer zero, they set kind of like the path forward for the network. And then you have like other people coming in over time and doing whatever, during the bull market. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, but in the same sense, I actually don't believe we're ever going to have another 2-year bear market for crypto, which is a double-edged sword. Again, it's good because like I hate 2-year bear markets. They're brutal as hell. And like everyone, I mean, even though everyone's like still motivated to build, it just feels so shitty watching kind of like the price do nothing in the face of all this adoption and building. But on the other end, on the other side, it's good because it's shitty because like we won't be able to kind of like weed out these, I guess, shitty projects as easily as we did in the past. But again, I think comes back to the social thing, like social signaling as well. Like whatever people within the ecosystem, especially the OGs that have been around for a while, whatever they put their weight behind, obviously, and kind of like their social signal is like a good thing. Obviously, is something to pay attention to. But yeah, I think this industry is just going to get much bigger from here, and it's going to be much harder to form a good social layer for any of these networks anymore. And I think Ethereum is in a very unique position to kind of like, keep the one that we've got, but also attract more people that think like us and buy into the Ethereum vision as well.
100%, brother. And on that note, I'm going to put the Daily Gwei YouTube into the YouTube chat one more time. If you guys like what you have heard today, go ahead and give Anthony a follow at his Daily Gwei YouTube channel. He talks about stuff like this 5 days a week, 30 to 40 minutes a day. I listen to it every single day to keep up with the world of Ethereum. Anthony, thank you coming back on a Friday semi-regular Bankless Daily Gwei live stream. Cheers.
Thank you for having me, sir. I can see you're tired, so have a good sleep.
I will. I mean, I got a couple hours of Dark Souls left in me before tonight, but yeah, other than that.
Yeah, fair enough. See you, man.